Welcome, everyone, to season 4 of Carefulist, the podcast. Today, I am so excited to introduce you to Barbara Karnes. She is a registered nurse, hospice expert, end of life educator, and author of the book and following series called Gone from My Sight. Welcome to the show, Barbara.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
I am really looking forward to this conversation. I think there will probably be a number of people who know who you are because of your vast reach into the hospice space. But for the folks who don't know who you are, let's start at the very beginning and hear your caregiving story.
Okay. I graduated from nursing school in 1962. And as soon as I graduated, I thought, oh my goodness, I've made a huge mistake. I should have never been a nurse. Actually, I should have been a social worker. But I never worked as a nurse in any of the medical settings. I got married, I raised families, and in the 70s, kind of the mid 70s, Dame Cicely Saunders in England came forward with a concept she called hospice. And that was taking care of people who were dying in a different manner than the medical arena takes care of people. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. So at the same time in this country, Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross said Americans are not taking care of their dying appropriately. They're putting them at the end of the hall with the door closed.
Yeah.
Um, so I spent a week with her in Escondido in the late 70s.
Mhm.
And that's when it was like, okay, this is what I want to do. But I had never worked. So I took a refresher course in nursing, and hospice in Kansas City was just beginning. And coincidence, and of course, there are no coincidences, right? I was in a group learning session, and you know how you introduce yourself as you go along and what's interesting to you. And I said I was interested in hospice.
Yeah.
After the meeting, a young man comes up to me and he says, I am the volunteer coordinator for the hospice in Kansas City, and we're looking for a nurse. Now, talk about synchronicity and
Oh
divine.
my gosh.
And I said, well, I can't be your nurse because I have no experience. He said, well,
Mhm.
come interview anyway. Well, long story short, I went to work for them. I said, I will volunteer for 20 hours a week for
Mhm.
you. I'll work with whatever nurse you hire. And I did that for 4 months, and they hired me, and I went on 5 years direct patient care, became director of hospices. Um, I want to say, to bring this whole story together, I truly believe that the gift I bring is that I never worked in the medical establishment. I had no idea on how to take care of people, let alone how to take care of dying people.
Right.
The patients and families taught me what dying is like
Mm.
and what was needed, other than medical anything.
Mhm.
They were my teachers. And that's the gift they gave me that I'm now trying to share with others.
That's incredible. And I love that because you didn't come into it with the preconceived notion of this is how it's supposed to be. This is the way it's been done for the last 30, 40 years when people made the change from passing at home, being cared for by loved ones, to passing in a medical facility. And now, of course, we're starting to make that transition. People at least have the choice to make that transition to passing at home or in a hospice facility that is made to be more comfortable than typical hospital setting would be.
Oh, absolutely. That's exactly. Um, and our medical model
Mhm.
is that in the United States, how we approach illness is the medical model takes care, addresses diseases that
Yes.
people happen to have.
Mhm.
And end of life care addresses people that happen to have a disease. The emphasis is on people. Now, obviously, I would like to see that emphasis be in our entire medical model, but
Yes.
right now it's not. And
Right.
so I think that that break from um, disease to people
Mhm.
began with the hospice movement, with the looking at end of life.
Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, wow, we're going to have a really good conversation. So my career, my background was in pharma and biotech as a marketing communications person. I am not a scientist. I am not a doctor or medical personnel in any way. But one of the companies that I worked for kind of flipped things on its head in a similar fashion, which was okay, we need to treat these things that these people have. But taking medication is really difficult for some people. It's really unpleasant. They can't swallow or they don't want to swallow. Pardon me. And so they created orally disintegrating tablets, the technology for ODTs. And that was my first experience with looking at the patient as a person who happens to have this thing and how can we help them. And so that has informed a lot of what I find important and what I look for in who I talk to for this show and the types of resources that I put on the site to help other caregivers because it's that exact approach. And my family's personal experience with hospice and my mom's hospice journey, um, it was a game changing experience for us to that point when you have gone through the medical journey and the way that people are treating the disease and all of that to treating my mom.
It's
It was night and day.
all about the person. And
Yeah.
that's hospice's focus. That's end of life. There are caregivers that, not just nurses, um,
Mhm.
that work in end of life. You've got your end of life doulas, you've got counselors, social work, you have a whole team, but the focus is the person and the family. Our
Yes.
medical model also just deals with the person's body, really.
Yeah.
Um, and caregivers, family, those people that surround the person that has an illness, they need communication, they
Yes.
need care, they need support as much as, and sometimes more than the patient.
Yes. And that for us, that was the huge difference. People more people were coming to help and be in the home. And then, of course, there were the social workers and the chaplain who came and could counsel on grief and what we were experiencing and what to expect. And the thing I loved that they talked to my dad about was, what is your plan? What are you going to do after your wife passes? Because you are so focused on the here and now and what's happening in 5 minutes that it's a sudden jolt, I think, for most people. When the person they're caring for passes, they haven't thought about what life looks like next. And so that conversation and coaching was really helpful.
Can I tell you a story?
Please do.
One night, I was in a home. The wife had died. I was there with the husband. We are waiting for the funeral home. And he and I are sitting in the kitchen and he's crying appropriately. And I've got my arm around her and he keeps saying, I don't know how I'm going to live without her. I'm saying, yes, yes. And I don't know how I'm going to live without her. You don't understand. I don't know how to cook. I don't know how to wash my clothes. I don't know how much money is in the bank. I
Mhm.
don't know how I'm going to live without her. My husband died 2 years ago, and that was at the point as I'm dealing with my grief in
Mhm.
the first few days was I don't know how I'm going to live without him. I don't know what banks we have. I don't know anything about the business.
Mhm.
I don't know how to take care of the outside of this house. I really appreciated at that moment that
Mhm.
dear gentleman who sat in his kitchen with me and said, I don't know how I'm going to live. It is a
Yeah.
complete change. And
Yes.
for partners, yes, but also when parents die, particularly when the second parent dies, and now you're the adult in the room, um,
Mhm.
there are all kinds of adjustments that grief brings beyond just, I'm sad that they're no longer in my life.
Yes. Absolutely. Because yes, that role change that you had is jarring even from a caregiving perspective. Suddenly, well, I'm the child, but I am still guiding you and we're having these conversations and I'm in charge of things I was never in charge of before. But then when that person's gone, and like you said, you are the adult in the room, it's like, oh, well, wait a minute. I was not prepared for this. Somebody else is supposed to, like, I could raise my hand and somebody else can answer this question for me. And that goes away. It's very disorienting.
It is. And, I thought I knew all about grief. I wrote a booklet about grief, for goodness sake. But it was an intellectual, mental approach to grief. And then, and yes, I've had my parents die, but it's to having my husband die, who I had been married to for 60, 64 years, knew him. Well, anyway, um, to have that big gape, that
Mhm.
hole left in my life that I had to figure out how to fill.
Yeah.
The emotional aspect of grieving, I didn't really know.
Hmm.
I think so many of us um, don't really understand grief and what grieving is. We think, yes, I'm sad, and that's grief. Grief is so much more
Yeah.
than I'm sad.
Right. Yes. And one of the phrases that I talk about a lot, probably because I didn't know it when I needed to know it. So now I feel like it's my mission to share it with people, is anticipatory grief. And I didn't know that phrase while we were going through things with my mom. And when I knew the phrase, then I thought, oh, well, that makes so much more sense. I wish I would have known that before. So that as my mom had dementia, so as we were losing pieces of her along the way, I was grieving all of those pieces. I was grieving the way that our roles changed. And then when she passed, she was in hospice for 3.5 years. We had a long go of it on hospice.
Ah, yes. How
So when
lucky.
she passed, it was that guilt of I've had so much grief already. I don't know how much more grief I have for this final passing.
Because you lost her a long time ago.
Yeah.
You know, with dementia, the person that you knew is no longer there, and you grieve that loss continually from the
Yes.
moment of diagnosis. You begin grieving. You
Right.
just don't, as a caregiver, you don't realize that what you're experiencing and thinking and feeling is grief. And
Right.
so with that, oh, there must be something wrong with me. I
Hmm.
must not be whatever, caring enough, sympathetic enough, whatever.
Hmm.
It's me. When in reality, it's grief.
Yeah. And grief is, like you said, so complicated. It is far more than sadness. It's anger, it's frustration, it's all of the emotions we've been taught are not polite to talk about.
Yes. And we deal with grief the same way we deal with living, all the emotions. So if I am an introvert,
Mm,
quiet, all within, I'm not going to share how I'm feeling with others. So I'm going to carry it inside, and that there must be something wrong with me becomes even heavier.
mm,
If I am quick to anger, then
hmm.
my grief will come out in anger. So you
Oh,
look at a
interesting.
person's personality, and that's how they're not going to change in their
Hmm.
grief. Their grief is going to be channeled through who they are.
That's a really interesting way to look at it. And it makes a whole lot of sense. You've just answered for me like a number of people in my life. Like if I'm thinking about how we all handled it, yep.
Okay. Now let's take it another step. And a person diagnosed with a life-threatening illness.
Hmm.
And as they approach end of life, they are going to deal with that illness and that journey in the same way they've dealt with their life and living.
Mm,
So those emotions and those reactions just become intensified. So if I'm kind of a restless kind of person, then I'm going to be really all over the place.
hmm.
If anger is how I express myself,
Hmm.
then I will be really hostile and angry. So it just, those personality traits don't change just because end of life is approaching. They
Hmm.
intensify.
Ah, from a caregiving perspective, that's really good to know so that you know sort of what to expect, but then also how to interact with and I don't know if the right word is help the person who is going through it. Um, Maybe that's something that you can answer better for me. So if someone, is quicker to anger or they're all over the place, as a caregiver, how can you help them channel the better angels of their nature?
I think being a being there,
Hmm.
being support. knowing you don't have to have answers. There's no answers to any of the questions that are being asked
Yeah.
here. Do not take personally, as a caregiver, the emotions that are being expressed.
Hmm.
And know that the person who is dying cannot give to you, the caregiver. And so, as a caregiver and a person emotionally involved,
Hmm.
you have to give what you want from this person.
Mm.
So, if you want a closeness, then you're the one that has to make that effort. Um, give what you want. If I think of, tell you a story. My mother was dying. I moved her in with me, quit my hospice job, moved her in with me, figured I could always get another one, but I couldn't always get another mother. So I was going to take care of her. So she lived with me for 5 months, and we had some kind of disagreement. And I left the room and I started crying, and I thought, I don't love her. I don't love her. And I
Mhm.
was just beside myself. I called my hospice social worker and she came right over, and I'm crying, I'm sobbing. I don't love her. And she said, Barbara, love is a verb. You are doing for her. You are caring for her. That is love also.
Yes.
And that was such a profound moment for me. And
Hmm.
then I started giving to my mother what I wanted her to give to me.
Hmm.
And it made our relate a whole difference because I wasn't expecting anything from her. She was too sick. She was dying, for goodness sake.
Hmm.
She couldn't give, but she could receive.
Yeah.
And that was a gift for me and her, actually.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Because one of the challenges, I think, especially when you're caring for a parent, as the child, you want what you've always had. And no matter what your life experience is, you're still their child and you still want to be parented. Even if you don't like to be parented, you still want that.
Absolutely.
And when that role changes and suddenly you're not getting back what you think you should be getting, that's a very, very hard and lonely thing to process.
It is. Excuse me.
Mhm.
There are so many aspects to caregiving.
Hmm.
We think about caregiving as hands on care.
Yeah.
That's just one aspect. We are more than physical beings. We are emotional, we are mental, we are spiritual beings. And yet we tend to focus on the physical part of our being
Hmm.
and really often don't know how to deal with the emotional, the mental, or even the spiritual aspects of our personality and of others' personalities. And
Right.
that affects relationships. And it is simply intensified when end of life is approaching. All of those aspects intensify.
Yeah. So when we talk about end of life, I know one of the big questions I get a lot, which quite frankly, I am not qualified to answer, which is why I was so excited to be able to talk to you today, is how do we know when end of life is approaching? What do we look for? When do we involve hospice? I know I'm asking a whole bunch of questions at once, but it's because it's all wrapped up, I think, in the same answer.
Absolutely, it is. Um, there are a lot of similarities between birth and death. They
Mm,
are just both ends of living. We
mhm,
go through labor to get into this world, and we go through labor to leave it. Also,
mm,
look at food. We come into this world when we're born, we get water is the very first thing, then it's milk, and then it's soft foods, and gradually we grow into what we consider normal eating. End of life, when it comes to food, when we are dying
mhm,
and end of life is approaching, three things start happening. Food is one of them. Food months before death occurs from illness or old age. It's actually years, but old age does the same thing that disease does. It just takes longer. So, months before death, a person will stop eating meat. And then
mm,
pretty soon it's fruits and vegetables. And then it's soft foods. And then you're doing good to get Ensure Plus or liquids down them. And
mhm,
then nothing. Just the reverse of birth into this world. They are being birthed into the other world.
mhm,
So, months before death from disease, food changes, sleeping habits change. Start taking an afternoon nap. And then pretty soon it's a morning and an afternoon nap. And then they're asleep um, through the whole TV show at night. You wake them up, you put them to bed, and they sleep all night.
mhm.
And then one day they don't get out of bed and they're asleep more than they're awake. And
Yeah.
the third thing that you look for in the dying process, and this has nothing to do with illness, this has to, and the different diseases, it has to do with the body and
Mhm,
how our body is programmed to die. And it's always died like this. It's always had this pattern. We've just stepped in with our medical model, thinking we know how to do it. The
mhm,
third thing that happens is a person starts withdrawing from the world around them.
mm,
Again, months before death, 2, 3, 4 months before death occurs, a person isn't interested in their favorite football team anymore. The
mhm,
guy that every Sunday watched the game, not interested anymore. And
mhm,
then pretty soon it's, don't have the church ladies come over. I'm too tired. And
mhm,
then it's, don't have the grandkids come over. They make me too nervous. And then the person goes completely within. They're disconnecting all their threads from this
mhm,
world. And that's what they should be doing. They're looking inside themselves. In the months before death, they're looking at their life, reminiscing, what have I done? But they'll gradually, when they're not interacting, inside, they're looking at that billion piece jigsaw puzzle that's
mhm.
their life. And they're saying, what have I done? Who have I touched? That in 25 words or less is kind of describing the dying process.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't include the labor itself. And that
Mhm,
labor itself is 1 to 3 weeks. And now the person is completely withdrawn in, is barely, you're doing good if you can get Gatorade down them. Probably not going to be able to. And they're working. And think of that woman in labor to give birth.
Mhm.
She's not going to have long conversations with you. You know, she's working to get that baby out.
Yeah.
And so is the person that's dying. They're working to get out of this physical body.
Thank you for explaining it that way. That is really helpful. It's good to have the explanation, of course, but also that visual for anyone who has had a child or been in the room or just understands in general how birth works. Um, it is a really, really helpful explanation to think about it. And in my personal experience as well, all of the things you were saying line up. I think one of the things that surprised my dad when he called hospice, he called because he wanted them to come just to give him an idea of what to look for and when, maybe she would be ready. And what shocked him was during the evaluation, they said, we think she could probably start hospice now. We go up to 6 months prior to someone's passing, which he didn't know, and I certainly didn't know at the time. Everybody that I know who used hospice was brought in a couple of days before, maybe a couple of weeks before. So that was a surprise to me. But then, of course, dementia is hard to read. So then my mom was on hospice for a really long time, but we benefited so much from that because, particularly with dementia, people don't know how to help, and medical community and otherwise, it's just something that isn't understood. So you're kind of on your own. And for us, hospice was the group of people who didn't leave us on our own. And we felt so supported. Um, but that was a surprise to him that 6 months ahead of time. So, my question here is certainly for the dying process, they're eating less and all of that, but is that what they should be looking for to call hospice, or should they call hospice sooner? How do people know when?
Number one, hospice does its best work in helping patients and families the longer they're on service, you
Mm,
know, which is basically what you just said.
yeah.
Um, I think that before you need hospice, when you've been diagnosed with a life-threatening illness and the doctors have said, we've done everything we can, there's no more treatment, go home, put your affairs in order. At that point, you call hospice. And you
Hmm.
can be driving your car, this person can be up and about but they have the diagnosis.
Hmm.
Call hospice and don't just pick one out of the directory. Call several hospices and interview them and
Hmm.
ask questions and pick a hospice before you need it.
Ah,
And that hospice, just like for you, will say, yes, I think it's appropriate. We can help you now. Or they may say, no, you really aren't ready for hospice, but here's when you call us. And
okay.
you need that touchstone before you need it,
Hmm.
before you're drowning as a caregiver in, I don't know what to do. And
Right.
so it isn't just the physical support that hospice gives, but the emotional. The
Hmm.
volunteers. We haven't talked about volunteers who come in and give that caregiver a chance to go take a nap if she or he wants, or goes to the store. So research, because not all hospices are alike.
Yep.
So um, do your homework and interview, and then they'll guide you, just like for you. You weren't
Hmm.
sure, and they said, hey, well, we'll take you. So um, do that before you feel you need them.
Yeah.
Because when you think you need hospice, you're way beyond the line.
Yeah. That's good to know. So when you say do your research, is there a question or two that people can use to weed the men from the boys, as they say?
I did a whole blog, excuse me, I did a whole blog on questions to ask
Mm,
for a hospice that, um, and I hate to say good hospice,
sure.
but um, hospice is more than a nurse coming in and taking a blood pressure and staying 30 minutes and leaving. Hospice is the nurse coming in and sitting down with the caregiver and saying, how are you doing today? Maybe over
Mhm,
a cup of coffee, you sit at the kitchen table and what's going on? What are you feeling? Um,
mhm,
okay, let's go see John now. What's happening with John? It is more than the physical, and it's
mhm.
that support that you're looking for. Say, how long do you think a nurse's visit is? And if they say, well, 30 to 45 minutes, you say, what happens um, if you come in and there's a situation and it takes an hour and a half?
Mhm,
How does that respond? You also want to ask about um, the approach to when death is happening.
mhm,
Hospice used to, our goal was to be with the patient and family at the moment of death.
mhm,
Everything end of life does leads up to the moment of death, the support before and the support after. But that moment, and today, most families are alone when their loved one dies at home.
mhm,
And so you want to talk about that. Hospice is more than a nurse coming in and pronouncing,
mhm.
it's more than calling and saying, um, Dad's dead now. What do I do? And the
Right.
nurse comes and says, yeah, he's dead. Call the funeral home. It's more than that.
Mhm.
So you want to know what kind of support do you get at the moment of death?
Yeah.
Just a few of read the
Thank
book,
you.
read the book.
Yes, those are excellent questions. And we will include a link to that blog in the description of this episode so people can go find it.
Okay.
Mm. Let's see. Gosh, you've shared so much good information.
Thank you.
Um, so I think I covered a couple of questions all at one time there. So let's talk a little bit about the books that you've written and particularly around, what is one thing, or maybe it's multiple things you wish more people understood
Uh,
about the dying process?
Dying is not like in the movies, where someone says something very profound and then closes their eyes and they're dead. But when grandma doesn't die that way,
Mhm.
then we think something's wrong. Something
Yep.
we did something wrong, grandma did something wrong. Now that's pathological. When in reality, uh, people dying, it's not necessarily pretty.
Hmm.
And so I would like to see, and the reason I've written all that I've written is to educate people um, about how death really happens and what it
Hmm.
looks like. Because knowledge reduces fear. And we're
Yes.
all going to be afraid when we're with someone who's dying, and we're going to be afraid when we're dying. So, um, also, all of the materials I purposely have written at about a fifth grade level, large print, 14 pages. They're short
Hmm.
because people under stress don't have the energy to read hardly anything. And they're not going to understand medical terminology.
Right.
And they're not going to ask what it means because then it appears that they're not very smart. So they'll
Hmm.
nod their head and not have a clue of what you're talking about.
Hmm.
So I have written, and I wrote Gone from My Sight because one night I was on call and family called. And what you learn in hospice is if family calls at 3 o'clock in the morning and you don't go make a home call, then you're going to wake up as a nurse and find your patient in the ER.
Hmm.
Um, so no matter what it is, the on-call nurse needs to roll out of bed and go. So I've got mom was really fine. Family was scared. And I'm explaining what mom's doing and the signs of approaching death.
Hmm.
And daughter was taking notes. And I thought, oh, what is wrong with this picture? She should not be having to take notes. And so I, that weekend, wrote Gone from My Sight so that I could give it to my patients.
Yeah.
What as Gone from My Sight became more well known, uh, I would get letters saying, Mom died 3 weeks ago and I want to order 5 Gone from My Sight. And I thought, wait a minute, they don't need Gone from My Sight, which was wrong because it does help even after mom is gone. Uh,
Yes.
but I
It
wrote
helps to explain what you've seen.
absolutely that it's
Yeah.
normal, nothing bad, pathological happened.
Yeah.
So I wrote a grief booklet because I thought people need this grief. Well, and that's used now a lot as a sympathy card. Um, so then hospice reached a point where they were not spending as much time with the families.
Hmm.
So I thought, well, families need to know what to do.
Hmm.
So I wrote The 11th Hour,
Yeah.
which Gone from My Sight says, here's what's happening. 11th Hour is here's what you're going to do while
Yeah.
this is happening. Every time I saw a need that wasn't being met, I wrote a booklet. Pain
Mm.
management, pain at end of life, dementia. I have a booklet on dementia. Uh,
Hmm.
a caregiver booklet on how to take care of yourself as a
Hmm.
caregiver. So, and I don't even know actually how many I've written at this point, but I can say to you that every booklet that I have written, it's because I have seen a need in the community. Um,
Yeah. I have to tell you that my role in our caregiving journey, I lived out of state. So I was doing remote caregiving, and my dad was the one doing the primary, and my sister was there. So the two of them handled the really heavy lifting stuff. And I was trying to figure out how can I support them even though I'm not right there. And so I was compiling resources and doing research and trying to figure out, okay, well, this comes next and that comes next and whatever. So when my mom passed, and I had this list of things that I had pulled together that we had used, I sent it to my dad and I said, I'm missing something you had told me something about, and it was your book, gone from my sight. And he said, if you don't tell anybody about any of the other things you have on your list, you have to tell them about this book. This was the single most helpful thing in I mean, you can't put a pinpoint on when dementia started, but it was well over 10 years for us. So, in over a decade, your book was the most helpful thing.
Oh,
So, I wanted to just say thank you for that because it meant a lot to us.
thank you for sharing that with me. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. You've helped so many people with your knowledge and your experience and the way that you've written those books for the purpose that you did is absolutely perfect. Because even if you're a scholar, when your parent or someone you love is in the process of passing away, you can't comprehend anything. So being able to read something simple in big print, whether it's for your eyesight or if it brings you back to being a kid learning to read a children's book with the big print, it's very comforting. And it is nice to know what's happening, even though it is the thing you wish most wasn't happening.
Right. But knowledge reduces fear.
Yes.
And we all bring fear to end of life. Different
Yes.
degrees, but it's going to be there, not only
Right.
for the person that's dying. And I wrote a booklet for the person with the life-threatening illness
Mhm.
on how to live the best life they can and give
Yes.
them guidance because that's we haven't really talked about that, but for the person diagnosed with a life-threatening illness, think of the fear and the questions that are going through their head if they've been diagnosed early enough. Um,
Yes.
and so I thought, okay, here's another need that needs to be met, and wrote that.
Yes. Well, all of those books are available on carefulist.com. And of course, they're available on Barbara's direct website, which we will link in the description of this episode today. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience? Anything else that they should know about hospice or the dying process, or if they've been diagnosed and they're wondering what next?
Well, that's another whole hour's worth of talk with
Yes,
with
it is,
that.
I'm sure.
But I will say that we are born, we experience, and we die.
Mm,
That's life. And we can make the end of our life a sacred experience. And I'm not talking religion or spirituality, I'm talking about a meaningful, memorable, um, tuck in your heart experience.
mhm,
And that's done by balancing the fear. We're not going to make the fear go away. The fear of mom's dying, what's going to happen, what's it going to look like, or the doctors say, I'm going to die, what's going to happen, we can't make the fear go away, but we can lessen the fear
mhm.
and make this a really meaningful part of our life experience because death is as much a part of life as being born, and we're all going to do it.
Yes.
So let's make our journey as sacred and loving and memorable in a good way. Um, as we can.
Yeah. Oh, wise words. Thank you so much for your time today and for sharing all of this incredibly important information. Death is hard, and knowing that it's coming is really hard. And being able to know what to expect and have information that you can lean on and people who've been through it that you can lean on, particularly folks who are hospice workers. I cannot stress enough how highly I recommend working with a hospice team because it does make a rough situation much easier to handle. So, thank you, Barbara, for being with us today and for the work that you've done. And for everyone who is listening at home or in the car or wherever you are today, thank you for being with us. And we'll see you next time. Take care.